It began like any other ordinary house in the heart of Gloucester, England, 25 Cromwell Street. To passers-by, it looked unremarkable, even modest. But behind those brick walls, beyond the soft curtains and the hum of daily life, something unspeakable was happening. It was a place that would later be known by one chilling name, the House of Horrors. This was the home of Fred and Rosemary West, a couple whose crimes would shock Britain to its core, revealing one of the most gruesome and depraved murder sprees in modern UK history. Fred West was born on September 29, 1941, in Muchmarcle, Herefordshire. His childhood was far from normal, steeped in violence, dysfunction, and disturbing family secrets. And his father reportedly taught him that sexual assault on women was acceptable behavior. These twisted lessons shaped Fred's psychology, turning him into a man with an insatiable appetite for control and cruelty. By the time he was a teenager, Fred had already started showing signs of violence. At 17, he suffered a head injury in a motorcycle crash that reportedly altered his behavior, making him more aggressive and unpredictable. Rosemary West was born on November 29, 1953, in Devon. Her early life was also marred by abuse. Her father was reportedly violent and sexually abusive, and her mother suffered from mental health issues. From a young age, Rose developed an unhealthy understanding of sex and power. When she met Fred West at the age of 15, she was immediately drawn to his dominance and charisma. Fred, then 27, saw in Rose a partner who shared his darkness. Together, they became a deadly combination, feeding off each other's desires for control, sadism, and violence. Their relationship started with manipulation and quickly spiraled into abuse. Fred already had 2 daughters from a previous marriage, and he soon brought Rose into their lives. It wasn't long before Rose began taking part in the sexual abuse of Fred's children. The couple's home became a prison of terror. What began as psychological abuse soon escalated to physical and sexual torture. By the early 1970s, the pair's sadistic fantasies had grown beyond what they could contain within the family. That's when the murders began. The first victim believed to have been killed by the couple was Fred's stepdaughter, Charmaine West. She was just 8 years old. In 1971, while Fred was serving a brief jail sentence, Rose lost her temper and murdered Charmaine. When Fred returned, he helped dispose of the little girl's body, burying her under the kitchen floor of their home at 25 Midland Road. Shortly after, Fred's first wife, Rena, who had been searching for her missing daughter, also vanished. Her dismembered remains were found buried near a cornfield. When the Wests moved to 25 Cromwell Street, their killing spree intensified. Between 1973 and 1979, the couple lured young women, often runaways or lodgers, to their home under the promise of work or accommodation. Once inside, the victims were imprisoned, tortured, raped, and eventually murdered. The basement became their torture chamber, soundproofed and equipped with restraints. Fred would record some of the acts, taking pride in what he called games. Afterward, the bodies were dismembered and buried in the cellar, garden, or under the bathroom floor. Their victims included 19-year-old Linda Goff, who went missing after telling friends she was moving in with the Wests, 15-year-old Carol and Cooper, 21-year-old Lucy Partington, who vanished while waiting for a bus, and 18-year-old Juanita Mott, among others. In total, at least 12 women and girls were murdered, though investigators long suspected there could be more. Some of the victims were as young as 8 and 16, even their own children were subjected to unspeakable abuse. The cruelty was unimaginable. Fred would often take Polaroid photos during torture sessions, and Rose was equally involved. They thrived on the shared violence, turning their victims' suffering into a symbol of their twisted bond. Neighbors occasionally heard screams from the basement but dismissed them as domestic disputes or noisy children. In truth, those cries were from women being brutalized in the depths of the house. In 1973, one of their lodgers, Caroline Owens, managed to escape after being abducted, beaten, and assaulted by the couple. She reported the incident to police, and both Fred and Rose were arrested. However, in a devastating failure of justice, Caroline's statements were dismissed, and the Wests were let off with a small fine for indecent assault. That missed opportunity allowed them to continue their reign of terror for another 2 decades. The facade of normalcy around 25 Cromwell Street was deeply deceptive. To outsiders, the Wests appeared like an eccentric but ordinary working-class couple raising a large family. Fred worked as a builder, and Rose occasionally ran a massage business from home. Their children went to school, though they often appeared withdrawn and terrified. Behind closed doors, Fred and Rose were forcing their own children to participate in or witness acts of sexual abuse, even inviting other men into the house to exploit them. As years passed, the weight of the secrets buried beneath their home began to surface. In 1992, one of their daughters, Heather, mysteriously vanished. The Wests told people she had run away, but neighbors began to suspect otherwise. When one of the West children confided in a friend that her parents had buried Heather under the patio, that rumor eventually reached school officials and the authorities. In 1994, police arrived at 25 Cromwell Street with a search warrant. As they began digging under the patio, they discovered human remains, bones, fragments, and evidence of burial sites. The investigation quickly escalated into one of the largest forensic excavations in British history. Over the next few months, police unearthed the remains of 9 young women and girls from the property. Each skeleton told a story of brutal violence, signs of bondage, sexual assault, and dismemberment. Fred West was arrested immediately, and Rosemary soon after. The couple initially denied everything, but the evidence was undeniable. Fred eventually confessed to several murders, often describing them in shocking detail, as if recounting a day's work. He tried to portray himself as protective of Rose, claiming she knew nothing. But investigators quickly proved otherwise. Rosemary had been deeply involved in every stage of the crimes. In January 1995, before he could face trial, Fred West was found dead in his prison cell. He had hanged himself with a bedsheet at Winson Green Prison. His suicide denied the families of his victims a full account of his crimes. Rosemary West, however, faced justice. In November 1995, after one of the most publicized murder trials in UK history, she was convicted of 10 murders and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, one of the rare full-life tariffs handed down to a woman in Britain. The trial revealed horrifying details of life inside the House of Horrors. Forensic experts testified about the condition of the remains, while surviving witnesses described years of psychological manipulation and sexual brutality. The jury listened to tape recordings of Fred's confessions, chilling in their casual tone. Rosemary, throughout the trial, showed little emotion, denying involvement and claiming she was herself a victim of Fred's control. But the overwhelming evidence painted her as an active, sadistic partner. The public reaction was one of shock and disgust. The British media descended on Gloucester, and 25 Cromwell Street became a site of national horror. Crowds gathered daily outside, journalists reported live, and the victims' names became a painful reminder of the evil that had thrived in plain sight. Eventually, the house was demolished in 1996 to prevent it from becoming a macabre tourist attraction. The site was paved over, now just an anonymous path, but the ghosts of what happened there remain etched in British memory. Over time, the story of Fred and Rosemary West came to represent the worst of human depravity, not only for their crimes but for the systemic failures that allowed them to continue. Missed police opportunities, social worker oversights, and societal blindness all contributed to the West's ability to kill undetected for nearly 2 decades. Even years later, investigators and journalists continue to search for answers. Could there be more victims buried elsewhere? Some believe Fred's claims of additional graves scattered around Gloucestershire may hold truth. Despite exhaustive searches, new bodies have never been conclusively found, but the lingering uncertainty haunts many. Rosemary West remains incarcerated at HMP New Hall in West Yorkshire, serving her life sentence. She rarely speaks publicly but continues to deny full responsibility. In 2021, rumors surfaced that she had confessed to one additional murder, though no charges followed. Her notoriety has made her one of Britain's most infamous female killers, often compared to Myra Hindley of the Moors murders. The story of the Wests remains a chilling warning about what can happen when evil hides in plain sight. Their home stood for decades as a symbol of normal domestic life, yet beneath its floors lay the evidence of unimaginable cruelty. It reminds society that monsters don't always lurk in the shadows. Sometimes, they live next door, smiling through the window of a quiet suburban street. The House of Horrors will forever be remembered not just for its crimes but for the haunting truth it exposed, that darkness can thrive behind the most ordinary doors. The victims' names, Charmaine, Heather, Linda, Carol and Lucy, Juanita, and others, deserve to be remembered not for how they died, but for the lives stolen from them. Their stories endure, ensuring that the horrors of 25 Cromwell Street will never be forgotten.